Go to the, here we go. So let's talk a little bit about influence. Like I said, we're going to keep that working, go back to that working definition that we've been working with for this series for control and influence. And we're going to keep those on the table. But we're also going to talk about influence in a different light for today. The word influence, it comes from the Latin word of influere. From in is into and fluere is to flow. So basically it had the original sense of something that was flowing out, an influx of something that flows. So when we think about the word influence, I want you to think of the word flow, or think of or visualize something that's flowing, kind of like, you know, water, as you see here with these rocks. It means the power or capacity of causing an effect in indirect or intangible ways. And also influence can be imperceptible or indirect action exerted to cause changes. Oh, what does all that mean, Laura? What is all that saying? Basically, what it's saying is that, you know, influence can be something that you may not even recognize, that, you know, it's nothing that stands out as, oh, I am trying to influence you. And if you look at these rocks in this picture, just to know from a scientific perspective, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a science major. I like science a little bit, but I do know a little bit about rocks and a thing called weathering. And so influence, that's with these rocks here. Most of these rocks at some point probably started off with very jagged edges, but because of the water flowing over it, if you look at, you know, waterfalls or anywhere where you see water and you see rocks, you can probably bet that at some point those rocks had jagged and sharp edges. But over the time, with something called weathering happening, where the flow of water slowly eroded some of the things from the rocks away with minerals and things, and it eventually starts smoothing those rock edges. So the water over time had this imperceptible influence, this imperceptible change. You couldn't go day by day and say, oh, one day it's jagged, one day it's smooth. So that's kind of the idea of influence, that it happens sometimes without people really even knowing that is happening. So when we talk about, you know, our influence, we may know that we are attempting to influence something, but it doesn't have to be something that we announce to the world that, oh, I am going to influence you to do blah, blah, blah. So when we think of the word influence, I want you to think of water flowing, and how that water flowing just on a consistent basis can change the shape of the rock. And when we think about our own influence in this world, how we can become like that water and change the atmosphere, simply change certain things. So we're going to go ahead and keep moving forward. So you guys got that? Influence, okay? Influence, it's a flowing. Sometimes it's imperceptible, sometimes it's indirect, sometimes you really can't even put your finger on it, but it is there. It is there. And so when we talk about influence, I want you guys to think about a king's flow zones. You know, the earth has its ozones. As kings, we have what's called our flow zones. And we want to talk about today our flow zones. And so we have these, we have the zone of concern. Okay, this is where influence actually start, that there's a flow of concern. And this is things that go on in our lives that we are aware of, that might attract us. That means that it gets our interest. It might impact us, or it might even distract us. And the things that typically fall into our flow zone of concern are things dealing with ourselves, things dealing with people who we are connected to, sometimes things dealing with things outside of us, or sometimes dealing with situations. So, you know, things that might, so for example, you know, my zone of concern might be oh, I'm getting ready to start school tomorrow and I don't even have all my stuff typed up yet for my classes and my syllabus yet. That might be a concern. The we part of my flow zone might be something that's going on with, let's say, Wayne and I. This is happening with us. It could be they are talking about me. They think this thing about me. Or it can be it could be a situation that might either attract us or it might impact us, or sometimes situations distract us. So let's give some examples here for the flow zone of concern. In Matthew 6:34, Jesus was going about, and it says, when Jesus went ashore, he saw a large crowd and he felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. Those people were in Jesus's flow zone of concern, and because he had this concern for the people, he did something about it. So that's part of flowing and influences, that you have to have some kind of concern for something. If it doesn't concern you, then you probably aren't going to want to influence. You're not going to be motivated to have any type of influence. So this is a positive type of concern. It attracted Jesus' attention. It didn't necessarily impact him, and it wasn't a distraction for him, but it attracted his attention to the point where he said, you know what? I'm feeling compassion about this situation. And because of they were lost like sheep without shepherds, and he did something about it. But now there's another part of being concerned where it could be a distraction, like worries. And so in Luke 84, when Jesus was teaching about the sower and the seed, and he talked about that seed that had fell among the thorns, and he said, these are the ones who have heard, and as they go on their way, they are choked with the worries and riches and pleasures of this life and bring no fruit to maturity. Those are those concerns that might distract us. They might impact us in a certain way, but they impact us in a way that it becomes a distraction. And then we don't bear fruit because we're stuck in this flow zone of concern that we don't have a plan to do anything about it. We're just worried about it. We're not trying to change it. We're just worried about it. And then in Luke 38-42, most of us know the story of the sisters, Mary and Martha. And, Jesus was traveling along, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister called Mary who was seated at the Lord's feet, listening to his word. But Martha was distracted with her preparations, and she came up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Then tell her to help me. But the Lord answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. So Martha was in this flow zone of concern where something that somebody else was doing or wasn't doing impacted her, but also distracted her, where she was just, so like, oh my goodness, this is happening. And I know sometimes a lot of us, when we read this story, we kind of point the finger at Martha, like, girl, sit yourself down somewhere and listen to what Jesus is saying. But I'm going to come in defense of Martha, because as a person who loves to host and as a person who has hosted large events, I know that, if I don't do something, who gonna serve these people? Who gonna put this stuff out? Who gonna cook this food? Who's gonna do this? So in defense of Martha, she wasn't totally in the wrong, because we know that when things happen, somebody has to do something. And so before you guys go, well, she should have had that stuff done before. It didn't say that she knew Jesus was coming. It says Jesus was going through the village, and he stopped in town. And how many of us have ever had last minute guests? Hey, I'm going to be in town tomorrow. And you're like, oh my God, oh my God. So sometimes you don't always have a chance to prepare. So let's get off. Let's ease up on Martha just a little bit. Okay. And just, be compassionate. And we're going to come back to this to talk about these different zones. But once again, those things that we are concerned about, they can be a distraction. And so our next zone is our zone of control, and then there's the sub zone of self-control, which goes into that. But basically, those are the zone where we control our actions, our choices, our emotions, our bodies, our thoughts. And the big thing that you need to understand about this zone of control and self-control, this is the I zone, because the only thing you can control is yourself. No one else falls into this zone of control. You cannot control people. You can't even really control situations, and we'll talk about that. But everything in this zone of control rests upon one person and one person only. This is the I zone. You see that? The zone of control. And then the zone of self-control. When we talked about control being a restraint, is how you restrain yourself in certain situations. When you find a zone of concern, things that are bothering you, you immediately have to figure out, okay, in my zone of concern, this thing is bothering me. But in my zone of control, what can I do about it? How, what power do I have over it? And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. But the only thing that we can really deal with in that zone of control, that flow zone of control, is I. And I want you guys to remember that the only thing that belongs in that zone is I, is yourself. Point to yourself and say, that's my zone, and my zone alone. Nobody else falls into that zone. So let's talk a little bit about the zone of control. In Romans 12:18, it says, if so is possible, so far as it depends on you. Okay, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. So Paul was just telling us that you can control that particular zone, that as far as it depends on you, you be at peace. And so when it comes to dealing with things of your concern, people are getting on your nerves, somebody's attacking you, talking about your character and all those different things, Paul is saying, as far as it depends on you, you can't control how anybody else responds to a situation. The only thing you can control is how you respond to a situation. And then in James 1:19-20, it says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Once again, James is talking about things that you are in control of, that you need to be the one who's slow to speak, who's quick to listen, slow to become angry. You control all of that. So sometimes there are situations in our control and in our concern zone that might make us angry. It might impact us in a way. It might distract us in a way. But you need to go back to that zone of control and self-control and say, you know what? I'm going to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. I'm going to show some constraint, some control of myself. Once again, you can't control anyone else. Even if someone is in your face, yakking, or your boss or whatever, you can't control anything. You say, well, I can pop them in his mouth, that'll shut them up. It would, but still in the end, you can get fired. So once again, you need to exercise some restraint, that the only person in those situations, the person who has the most power, is you. And then in Galatians 5:16-23 says, but I say, walk in the spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. But the fruits of the spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. All of those things belong in your zone of control. Love, you control that. You control how much joy you have. You control how much peace you have. You control your level of kindness. You control your goodness, your faithfulness. You control your gentleness. You control all of that. And the word says, against such, there is no law. There is nothing that restrains you from love, nothing that restrains you from joy, nothing that restrains you from peace. But you have to remember that that's your flow zone of control. And we want to make sure that when there are things that concern us, then we need to immediately go into our flow zone of control and say, okay, this concerns me. What can I do about it? This concerns me. This is distracting me. This is attracting me. This is impacting me. Let me get into my zone to see what can I do about it. Okay, oh, my husband is getting on my nerves and he needs to change. No, 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 no. I can't make him change. And I'm not saying Wayne's getting on my nerves, so don't y'all
Oh,
read into
okay.
this.
Okay.
I
I
see
was
Wayne about to come off mute and say something.
okay. All right. All right. All right. That
But
was just an example.
that was just an example. But let's say if he was getting on my nerves because he's doing such and such, I can't control what he does. I can only control my response. And when I understand the power that I have in that situation, I'm going to ask myself, what can I do about it? And once I understand the control that I have over a situation, this is when we can enter our zone of influence. And this is where we use our authority, our relationships, our networking, our communication skills to cause an influence. And that's that zone of we, is that, how can I use my control in this zone that concerns me? I'm going to move into my zone of control and then think, okay, how can I use my relationship? How can I use my communication skills to influence that? So, let's say, for example, Wayne was doing something that was really bugging me. That was my zone of concern. I'm going to move into my zone of control where, you know what, I can't change his behavior. I can't do anything. But if I understand the power of influence that I have, I can use, let's say, my communication skills to let him know that, you know what, when such and such happens, this is how it affects me and blah, blah, blah. And it's up to him to make that change. And when we realize that, when we give up that need to control people, to try to bend them to our will, that's such a burden that's going to be lifted off your shoulders, because you cannot control other people. And we're going to get into some examples later on, but you need to keep that in mind, that as kings, we do have these flow zones: our zone of concern, our zone of control, and our zone of influence. And let's talk a little bit about our zone of influence. Matthew 5:14-16 says, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. Light shines before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. That's influence, when you can use your light to shine on others, and they give glory to God for what they see you. But now influence can work in a negative way too. And in 1 Corinthians 15:33, it tells us, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupt good morals. And so we can use our influence in a negative way. And we're going to talk about that a little bit there. But once again, influence is what happens when you are in relationship with others. You can't influence anyone or anything that A, you don't have a concern about, or B, you're not in a relationship with. It's very hard to make an impact or to influence things that you don't care about, or it's hard to influence or impact people that you are not in a relationship with. So before you try to influence something, ask yourself, does this really concern me? Is this really any of my business? Do I have the power to control anything over it? No. You figure out, okay, What control do I have? And once again, it's going to always be focused on what you can do with yourself. Before we go on, does anyone have any questions, comments? We're good. So this is what we're talking about. Oh, we got the Daniels. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I just want to share, this is a very good word. Thank you for sharing this morning.
Can you speak up a little bit, Matthew? Just a little bit for me.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I was just going to say that this is a good word this morning. So thank you for sharing that with us. Also, this is very enlightening that it would also help us in our own kind of self-reflection as well as we go throughout our days, just interacting with people and the decisions that we're making. And it also will help free up our soul as well in our consciousness. So thank you. And I'm loving where this is going. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me open up the chat here. See, we got a few chats to make sure.
Yeah, Corey has her hand up.
Okay, Corey, go ahead.
I would just like to say that I think that this is an excellent time to also plug in your calm and poise training that you do with the communication, because that alone, would help direct people and give them instructions on how to do the communication part, because that training works wonderfully. So just wanted to plug that one in as well.
Corey's my official PR rep. She's always plugging something that I'm doing. And Poise and Calm is actually an acronym for dealing with communications and tough, hard communication with other people. And I can probably get a link or something to some information about how to handle difficult conversations with calm and poise. So, Ambassador TC.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that I think we need to push out to like adults, especially in school systems, because we're oftentimes in school classrooms and things, teachers are trying to control situations versus influence situations. And then we wonder why we can't get our students to understand how they can influence situations. So I'm sitting here thinking, how can this be, we can get this into schools. We could change the way behaviors are in schools. Because I say a lot of teachers are, you're gonna do what I say, you're gonna do what I say, versus influencing them on how things should be done and letting kids know that you have an option. Now, one of them is probably not very good, but you do, and influencing them to make right decisions.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. And Alan, and to be, full transparency, this is actually an adaptation from Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, when he talks about concern, influence, and control. And so this is not something that, Ambassador Laura is so deep. No, this is just something that it's out there. And so that might be something, Ambassador TC, for you to take back to, maybe, say, hey, can this be required reading? Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then you will see, that, some of this stuff looks, familiar to that. So yeah, definitely, when it comes to adults dealing with children, whether it's in school or our own children or our adult children, definitely to take this time to go through this matrix. And I know you think that, well, who has the time to go through all that when something happens? Here's the thing. If you take the time to go through these steps, it might take you 60 seconds to roll through these different steps. This gives you enough time to respond versus react. And so sometimes, when somebody, once again, that's where that restraint comes in, that, being quick to listen and slow to speak. Sometimes you don't have to respond in a second. Sometimes you might need to take that 60 seconds to say, okay, this is bothering me. What can I do about it? Take that time to close your mouth and think walk through these steps, and then you can respond versus react to something that's concerning you versus reacting to something that's going on outside of you. Ambassador Reginald?
Yeah, I just like to make the comment because this is something I always try to teach my young youth at the job I work at. And even when I speak to youth and even with my boys, is that you got to learn how to act and not react. If somebody hits you, the normal reaction is to hit them back. But I try to teach them, depending on where you're at and the timing that you do that, you could be in more trouble than the person that actually hit you. And then I think about our young Black men, how many of them that just lose their life, lose their freedom because of what? Because of how they react. Just the heat of the moment, they react and they done shot
Mhm.
somebody, So I just want to give that example, the power of being in control and learning how to act instead of react.
Yeah. When it comes to these zones, that zone of control and self-control, I would say, that's probably the most important thing on how to move from concern to influence. Because if you don't have that self-control, and we'll talk about that, kind of get ahead of myself, but having that control, or understanding what you have control of, and then ultimately understanding the only thing I have control of is of myself, that's going to go a long way into once living a life of peace, living a life where you're not distracted and just moving with every kind of wind that carries you along with anger and all this stuff. Is you focus on the I part. That's that's the center of that zone. Is it's about you. You can't control the other person. You can't, you would like to, you would like to think that you can, but ultimately the only person you can control is yourself in these situations. And so let's talk about this when we talk about influence.
Laura,
Yes,
you
I'm
had
sorry.
one more hand. You had
Oh,
one
I'm
more hand
sorry.
up.
Who has the hand up? Go ahead.
It was Corey.
Oh, go ahead,
Um,
Corey.
just what you were saying about having self-control or understanding that you can only control yourself. I think for a friend of mine who has anxiety attacks, I think that is the number one issue that I try to get her to understand, that if she understood, she doesn't have control over, the people in the car next to her, or, what she think is going to happen at, a high school football game. But when you get that understanding, I think that that would eliminate or reduce, people having panic attacks. It seems like, too many people are claiming that they have anxiety and taking anxiety medicine and all of that. I think if they just understood that, what you're saying is you can only control so much and to
Yeah.
let it go.
Yeah. I mean, even when it comes to, oh, so and so doesn't like me, this person doesn't like me, I can't control that. I can't control whether you like me or not. That's not up to me. I can just control my only response is I can control myself. This is what I'm putting out into the world. If you don't like it, that's on you. And it's so funny. I've had a few people come to me and say, well, you know what, when I first met you, I didn't like you. I didn't like you, because, they didn't understand that one person thought I was rude because, they spoke to me and I didn't speak back. And somebody had to tell them, well, she's hard of hearing, she's deaf. And so she might not have heard you speak. And so I've had several people come to me to apologize for how they first felt about me because they misunderstood who I was. I can't control how you feel about me. I really can't. And so those things didn't bother me, whether I knew you didn't like me or not. I'm like, okay, that's up to you. I can only control me. And that just takes so much weight off my shoulders. I'm not trying to go through this world to have people like me or dislike me. I am just who I am, and I may rub some people the wrong way. I can't control how people respond to who I am. And so if we can just understand that the only thing we can control is us, our responses, our actions, our thoughts, our emotions, how we restrain or constrain ourselves in certain situations. Because if we don't, this is what I want to talk about next, that if we don't understand how to control ourselves, how to walk in that self-control, how to understand what we can control and what we can't control, then we may go from an ideal of influence versus manipulations. And if we don't manage that control zone very well, so let me show you what this looks like. You know, I love little visuals, is that we have our concerns, and our concerns can naturally flow into how are we going to influence those things that concern us. But we can't get to the influence until we manage that control zone. But when we mismanage that control zone and we try to exert our control over people, that turns into manipulation. And we don't want to manipulate. So let's take a little deeper look at this graphic here. And so, you know, you see right here, that little, I don't know if you can see my arrow here yet. This little siphon is where you can flip how you're going to handle that control zone. Are you going to say, you know what, the only thing I can control is myself. The only thing I can control is myself. And that's when it flows into influence. But when you try to exert your control, it goes into manipulation. And this is, you know, and I thought about this as I was writing this, is that manipulation, you know, it basically, it comes from the word to handle, you know, how you handle things, how you manipulate stuff, how to handle it. But, you know, the first three letters in manipulation is man. Manipulation focuses on self. How is this going to benefit me? How can I change this situation to my benefit? When we talk about influence, you see that word in, think about, you know, we're in this together. That when we're influencing things, we're saying, you know, how can we make this better for all of us? And as leaders, we want to make sure that we are leaders who, when we come into a situation and we are concerned about it, and we want to see changes, and we understand what we can control, is that we want to make sure that we're thinking, how can I make this situation better for all of us? Because we are, boom, in this thing together. Let me see if I can go back here. Oops, I'm sorry. Is that this is where we want to be, the influence, that this situation that concerns you, you want to make it better for everybody, not just yourself. It helps everybody. That's when you know you're flowing in influence versus manipulation, when you're thinking, I'm going to make this all about me. How can I, that's, you know, let's go back to, you know, Wayne and I, you know, we're married, and I want him to do something so that it benefits, you know, me. Okay, for you, I've been trying to get this hot tub. He won't give me a hot tub in the house. You know, he won't let me put a hot tub in the house, you know, and I could try to do things and say certain things to manipulate his feelings and make him feel bad. But ultimately, you know, he's in control of, you know, that particular thing. And so it's like, okay, you know, I can't change his mind. And so, you know, I could get mad and pout and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, I have to understand that, you know what, I can only control myself versus, you know, let's say there are things that I want to do in the house that he knows that it's for the betterment of everybody. And that's influence, is that I want to influence this, you know, my house to make it better for everyone who enters. Now, I know some of you, Corey, are probably thinking, well, you know, the hot tub would influence everybody else, but Wayne's not seeing it that way. So I'm sorry. But at any rate, so we want to make sure when we're talking about those zones of influence that we don't mismanage our control and go from trying to influence a situation to change it into the better to mismanaging, and it turns into manipulation. And we're going to see a couple of examples of that as we go on. So let's talk about our first example. We talked about Esther last week. and we don't have time to, investigate the full book of Esther, I recommend that you go back and read it. Hopefully you guys know enough of the stories to answer these questions that I'm going to be asking you about Esther. For those, if you aren't quite sure, that's okay. But for those of you who, know the book of Esther and you know these answers, please don't be silent. Well, I'm gonna just wait for somebody else to answer. Please just go ahead and chime in for me. So let's talk about, the story of Esther. We know she replaced Vashti, or is it Vashti, as the queen. And as we pick up in Esther, 3 is when the stuff happens between Haman, and he's talking about, trying to kill the Jews, and Esther's uncle Mordecai, comes to her and asks her to help. So this is where we pick up Esther's story, okay? So here's our first questions. What was Esther's concerns? When we talk about her flow zone, what was her flow zone of concern? What was Esther's concerns? Anybody?
Her people would be killed.
Okay, her people were going to get killed. Anybody else? That's about the crux of it. Her people were going to be killed. By who? Does anybody remember who?
That was Haman, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Haman, who was an important person in in the king's staff, he concocted this plan to try to kill the Jews, and we'll talk about his rationale for why.
Laura, another one of Esther's concerns is that the king would find out what she really was.
Okay, yeah, because she was a Jew and she didn't know. Her uncle Mordecai told her to keep that hidden, and so yeah, that was another one of her concerns. Anybody else?
She,
Go ahead.
yeah, ladies first.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I'm saying that she was concerned to control her own prayer lifestyle. She went to the fasting life to control the situations, to control that killing or whatever was going to happen with her nation. So she sacrificed her with her emotions of her prayer lifestyle and whatever she was doing for her nation.
Okay, good. So we see her concerns. She was concerned about her people. She was concerned about the fact of being a Jew. She was also concerned about how the king was going to respond to her coming before him, and he didn't send for her. So she had a lot of different concerns, what they were going to do to the people, how it was going to affect us, her people. And so that was that flow zone of concern. But now let's talk about her zone of control. What could she control, or what did she try to control? What was in her realm of control? Could she control the king? Ambassador
Reginald
Reginald?
Favors has his hand up.
Mm-hmm.
What I see is that she was one that felt the concern to do something so she could control how she present herself, how she carried herself, knowing that if she did it in the right way, she maybe could bring about influence.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
Yeah, she can only control her own voice to speak, to say something or not.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else? There are no right or wrong. There are no wrong answers.
And very firstly, I would really appreciate you to show the picture of my favorite actors from India. As I asked her, she is Kajol, Indian actress.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, and she actually, Asa was trying to control. I must say, as I have read about the book of Esther, she was trying to control her own prayer lifestyle, which was the mostly appreciable thing which she was doing to control her prayer lifestyle, because she was away from she was with a other religion person, and who was not a Jew. So she was trying to control her prayer lifestyle. That was the best she could do for her
Okay.
nation. For people, yes.
Okay. And if we notice, everything that we said about control, it all dealt with things that it dealt with her. It didn't, you didn't say, oh, she tried to control the king, she tried to control Mordecai, she tried to control Haman. She did things that was in her control. And so our next question here, how did she attempt to use her influence? Once she realized these are the things I can control, what was her response to that? How did she try to influence, or how did she influence the situation? What was the end result? Ambassador Reggie?
She used it not just for self. She was using her influence to the betterment of the people. And I think that is very key, is your motive.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
She made that appointment with the king, and by making that appointment, then she got herself prepared when she was summoned to come to him, because first she had to make an appointment to see him.
Okay.
Preparation.
Anybody else?
Yes, actually, she was making her influence by trusting his living God and trusting her living God, and making all the strategy about saving his nation, saving her nation, and facing the king in that terrible time.
Okay, awesome. And now, going back to what we say with influence, she used her relationship with the king. She used her relationship with Mordecai. She used her communication skills. And just like we talked about earlier, that sometimes it might take a moment to run through these zones. But, if you read the story, that she didn't make this rash decision. She said, okay, when Mordecai brought her the news, she didn't say, all right, I'm going to go to the king and give him a piece of my mind and tell him, what's going on. She didn't do that. She said, okay, hold up. Send message to Mordecai, tell him, don't do nothing else. I'm going to call a fast. I'm going to do, this is what I can control. This is the things that are under my control. I'm going to get some wisdom about how to handle this situation. And so now everything's not going to take a 7-day fast to make those decisions. But this is just the idea that sometimes you have to take a step back and in your mind roll through, okay, I'm concerned about my people. I'm concerned that, this man is trying to kill my people, that it's going to be found out that I'm a Jew also. And it did come out in the end that she was, but that's because she revealed it. And so, all these concerns was running through her head, but then she had to take a step back and say, okay, hold on. What can I do? She couldn't control the king. She couldn't just tell the king, you better tell Haman, he better get his mouth off my people, keep my people's name out of his mouth. She couldn't do all that. She had to understand, okay, I have to offer some, what can I control? And I have to offer some restraint that I'm quite sure in her mind, she was angry, she was hurt, she was scared, but she had to understand, okay, let me bring all this and let me take a step back and say, okay, this is what I can control. I can control my speech. I can control my adherence to protocol. I can, control how I present my request to the king. I can use my relationship, with the king, and as Dr. Banks taught last week, that preparation, that presence, I can, she can control how she presented herself. She didn't come, with her hands on her hip and her head all cocked to the side and pointing the finger. That would not have worked. It would not have worked with the king. And so we have to understand that when it comes to control, knowing what we are in control of and knowing that ultimately it's us and our self-control and what we do with our own thoughts, our own voice, our own bodies, our own actions, that's when we can move into that zone of influences. This is what I can control, and this is how I am going to use my control over myself to influence this situation. So let's move to our next example. Let's talk about good old Haman. Okay, for those who know the story of why Haman wanted to kill, ended up trying to kill all of the Jews. Who remembers, who knows, what was Haman's concern? What was his big issue with the Jews? Mordecai specifically.
He wanted control. He wanted, excuse me, I'm hearing feedback, Reginald. Turn your thing on.
What? I got nothing up. That's you.
Say that again, Lady Donna.
I was saying that Haman's problem was that he had a sinister agenda, and he was lying to the king, and he wanted control, and Mordecai did not bow down to him, and that's what made him angry. And so that's what stirred him up, wanting to kill the Jews. And so that was his thing. And I also wanted to say that along with stepping back and doing all you know to do, but you got to have room for heaven's influence, because what Esther did, she had them to fast and pray. So the world itself, I hear, they know the logical thing to do. They know to step back. They know New Age principles, but we need to show them we have heaven influence over what they logical thinking is. And so Haman represents the world. He wants to control, and God intervened and allowed the king to find out his agenda. And that was through the fasting and praying.
Okay, awesome. And so, Ambassador, anybody's got their hand up, we're good. And so as Lady Donna was saying, Haman's concern, it started with, he was mad at one person. He was upset at Haman because at Mordecai, because Mordecai wouldn't bow down. And his anger at this one person ended up to him trying to annihilate a whole people, because he was upset with one person because one person wouldn't bow down to his greatness. So that was his major concern. It was all about himself. It had nothing to do with the people or anything like that. So going back to what could he control, or what did he try to control? And Lady Donna talked a little bit about that. He tried to control the king by manipulating, because he couldn't, because he had no self-control. He could not restrain his anger. He could not restrain his bitterness. He could not restrain himself from, his pride. And so he tries, Lady Donna said, he tried to control the king by, using these, false words, and not even really false words. What he was saying was true. Okay, the people were different. Some, they wouldn't bow down, but he was using them for a malicious intent, as Lady Donna was saying. So that kind of answered that question. What could he control, or what did he try to control? He could have controlled himself, but did he? No, he did not. And so let's see what happens here. So how did he attempt to use his influence? We kind of talked about that. Anybody else want to add anything else to that? Ambassador Reggie?
Manipulated. Oh, go ahead.
You can go ahead first.
He manipulated the people to try and get them on on his side by, you know, kind of creating a mob mentality and getting them all riled up to think that, you know, that the Jews were thinking to overturn them and they weren't even thinking about them. You know, it's like you try to get somebody to fight with you and other people don't even know you trying to fight them. That's not
Yeah.
really a good, that's not really a fight.
Okay. Okay. Ambassador Reggie.
I see him that he wanted to control the people and try to indirect control the king by manipulating. It's like he wanted to usurp the king's authority in a manipulative way by doing something the king wouldn't do. You know?
Okay.
And that's what's sad. He got close enough to the king, but he didn't agree with what the king was doing or how he was handling it. So he found a situation to turn it to where the king would do what he wanted him to do.
Okay. And, you know, in the end, once again, that he did influence the situation, but it was a bad influence. Once again, influence can be positive or negative. And once again, you know, you have that influence, you know, / manipulation. He tried to manipulate a situation to benefit himself. It wasn't about his people. It wasn't about the king. It was all about, he wanted that honor from Mordecai. He wanted that glory. He had, you know, his pride got the better of him. His anger got the better of him. His envy, his bitterness, he could not control. He had no self-control when it came to the things that he couldn't control. He had no self-control. And for those who know the story, what happened to Haman in the end?
Hung like a tree on what he set up for Mordecai.
Exactly. Exactly. So, you know, all of that, you know, you know, his concerns led him to trying to figure out what he could control. And because he tried to control other people versus himself, he ended up, once again, because he had no restraint. He couldn't restrain. He had no self-control over his pride, over his anger, over, you know, his bitterness and all that stuff. He ended up in, you know, hanging on those gallows he had made for someone else. And, you know, for those of you who, you know, want, you know, go read the book of Esther to really get all those really, you know, good details. And, you know, sometimes, you know, if you read it and you just look at Haman, I'm sorry, you know, you have to laugh, you know, like that's what you get. That's what you get. But, you know, when you look at it through those zones of concern, control, and influence, and you might see in a whole new light, you know, with that. And so here's the thing, you know, to understand is that in Proverbs 25:28, it says, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Is that when you don't have self-control to gird you and to strengthen you and to protect you, you open the door to all kinds of chaos coming in. You know, you open yourself up to emotional vandalism, spiritual vandalism, that, you know, things can just come in and tear you apart, tear your life apart, all because you could not exercise self-control. And so you open yourself up to, once again, being vandalized. That's basically, if you look at this picture, this is what, you know, it's vandalism, you know, graffiti, you know, things tore up, things, you know, you open yourself up to spiritual and emotional vandalism when you don't operate in self-control. Understand what you can control, and the only thing you can control is yourself, and that you need to operate in that zone of self-control. If you don't realize that, take that step back, this is what happens to you. This is what happened to Haman. He had just no control, no self-control. So let's look at these flow zones again, and we're gonna walk through an example. Does anybody have anything before we go on? We're good. So let's talk about, let's see what this looks like, you know, in reality. So let's say things that concern you, and usually things that concern us, is, something that's going on with us, with us individually, with us and maybe our relationships, something that's going on, like, they did this, they are doing that, or a situation. And so let's say, right now here in the United States, a lot of things going on with politics, and it concerns many of us, who's going to be elected to do what, whether it's local or national politics. And it's just, it's crazy over here. And a lot of us, may have those concerns about politics, things that concern us. And so with that, we have to ask ourselves, okay, these things concern me. What can I do? And once again, you can't control the president, you can't control the senators, you can't control the things that other people do. The only thing that you can do is understand, this is what I can do. You can vote, you can campaign to run for a local office. If something that you don't like on the school board or anything like that, you know what can you do about it? What are you going to do about it? You, once again, vote. There's a whole saying that if you didn't vote, shut up. And even though it sounds on the surface, well, that's just, you can't just say that. But if it really concerns you, then you would put, you would put your vote to it. And so when you understand that, okay, this whole thing that concerns me, we're talking about politics. I'm concerned about the way politics is going. I'm concerned about who's in office. But you know what? I can't control that person in office. But you know what I can do? I can vote. And if I don't like what that person is doing, I don't have to vote for them. Or if I'm really froggy and I want to be in politics, I can go ahead and campaign for an office. And then that's when you talk about influence, that, when you can influence the political power balance, that we see that here in the United States all the time. Every 4 years, we vote for a president or, the Senate and the congressman. And at any given time, those power balances between the Democrats and the Republicans can shift. For those Pastor Wasim, our Senate is in such a tight balance that is pretty much 50-50. And during the election time, it could swing either way. And that's why voting is important, because right now it's 50-50 and we have elections coming up. It could go either way. And so this is how you influence politics, with your vote, with your campaigning, with the things that you put into it. And so that's just, once again, that's just one example. And we're going to, once again, give you guys a chance to work through some different things. But when we talk about the flow zone, that flow zone of concern, hey, what's going on in the politics concern me. What can I control? I can't control anything anybody does, but you know what I can do? How I can influence it is with my voting. I can control that. That's the only thing I can control. I can't control how Reggie votes. I can control how I vote. And this is how you change the political power balance, is enough people get together and you vote a certain way. So now with that, when we talk about, influence and how people use their influence, and we talked about, so sometimes that influence can be tiny, it can be imperceptible. You think, oh, my little one vote doesn't matter. There was just an election here just recently for our city council, and the person lost by 30 votes. Had 30 more people gotten up off their couches to go and vote for this particular person, or 31 more people, he may have won. And so that's how tight, 30 people out of thousands who stayed at home, they supported him on Facebook and things like that. But did you go vote for him? That's what you can control. Who knows who this man is? Anybody? He's
I do.
I know you do, Wayne. This is Douglas Coe. Now, many of us don't know Douglas Coe, or don't know the name when we hear it, but Douglas Coe is a very integral influence in political parties. There's a documentary you can watch on Facebook called The Family, very interesting. But it's a group, and it says it has its tentacles around the world, and he meets with presidents and foreign, well, he's dead now, but presidents and foreign leaders to spread the view of Jesus. And so, Pastor Wasim, even though you may not know this man, he probably had a hand about something in your country. He's definitely had a hand in America. How many of you guys know about the National Prayer Breakfast? You've heard about that. This is who was at the center of it. This man here. He's been referred to as the Stealth Billy Graham. He was named one of the 25 most influential evangelicals in the United States. George Bush called him, says, quiet diplomacy. Okay. Now you may think, okay, how does he, this man ain't got nothing to do with me. For those of us in Chattanooga, you need to understand that our politics are being directly influenced by something this man put in place years ago. We just have two newly elected people in our political realm as the county mayor and the district attorney. Okay. I don't know if I could say their last name. I don't want nobody coming after me, but y'all know that song, Womp, there it is. Okay. Remember that name, Womp? That Zach Womp was under this man's tutelage in this documentary that is about him. Yeah, Zach Womp is mentioned in there, and I encourage you to watch it. But I say that to let you know that what this man did, he dealt with the things that concerned him. And what concerned him was spreading the gospel of Jesus, but what concerned him was in the political realm. And he figured out, this is what I can do about it. And he put some very different things in place that are long lasting, even until today. He has pretty much an indelible legacy in political parties, and this is the left and the right, Democrats and Republicans. Once again, he's met with foreign leaders, so it wouldn't be unbelievable to think that he had a hand in Pakistani politics in some kind of way. But that's influence. This is how he used his influence. And now, once if you see the documentary, you might think, oh, that's great. Or you might say, that's kind of scary. But no matter what you think about his influence, you have to understand that he used what he could control to, in his flow zone of control. His flow zone of concern was how American politics were going. His flow zone of control was, this is what I can do as Doug Coe. And he used his network, his relationships, his communication skills to affect a lasting change. And I'm going to say it's probably not going to change anytime soon, because he replicated himself. He duplicated himself over and over and over again, that even until now, we have people who are in our political leadership here in Chattanooga who I'm quite sure is impacted by whatever he was teaching, because that's what their daddy was under. You see how that works? You see how that influence, and well, who was this man? We don't know him. He didn't have to be out front. But when you see that documentary, you would see different pictures of presidents and groups, and they're circling his face, that he's always there in the background with that influence. Here's another person I want to ask you guys. Who knows who this man is? I know you know, Wayne. Anybody else know who this man is?
I know who he is, but I can't think of his name. He was like, they had a documentary on Netflix, The Godfather.
Exactly. His name is Clarence Avant, and he's known as the Godfather of Black music. And if you're in those circles, you know him. But all of us have been impacted by the work that he has done. He was just in the news recently only because someone broke into his house and killed his wife. That's the only reason he was in the news. But once again, you know, he had that care and concern for Black arts, Black music, things, you know, things dealing with the African American community and the arts field. And he's known, once again, you know, as the Godfather, and he's very famous in the music industry. And he's founded record labels. He's held fundraisers for Democratic candidates. He's been a mentor to several African-American, African-American executives, but he's also been a mentor to those who are not African-American. If you watch that documentary, it's called The Black Godfather, you see all types of people who talk about how he influenced them. And if you look at this list, you know, you see it crosses gender, it crosses race, it crosses generations, young, old. You got anywhere from Bill Clinton to Snoop Dogg. You got, you know, David Geffen, Clive Davis, who are, you know, older, you know, white men, to younger people like, you know, Babyface and things like that. So this, you know, this man used his influence. He wasn't, you know, always out there, but if you ask, you know, even Barack Obama, he had, you know, Barack Obama talks about him. And so once again, it's about how you understand what you can control. You know, when he came into the music industry, he was really integral in making sure, you know, Black people got their due. That was one of his concerns, you know, Black people getting their due. He couldn't control, you know, how the finances were done and things like that. But what he did was he figured out what he could control, what he could contribute. And so now here he is called, you know, he's the Black Godfather. He's still living, as a matter of fact. But once again, you know, he's not out front, but he used his influence to change the whole landscape of not only the music industry, but because he mentored so many people, changing the landscapes of whatever fields they were in. If you look at this list, you know, you got politics, you have arts, you have, you know, the government, and, you know, you have these different fields that this man had a hand in impacting the people in the fields. And so once again, we talk about influence. You may not be in a particular field, but you can have a hand in mentoring someone who's going out into those fields, and you can have an impact in how that person operates in those fields. So that's the power of influence.
And I highly recommend anybody watching that documentary, because that was amazing.
It was. It's called, for those of you, it's called The Black Godfather. I don't know if it's on Netflix or you can find it somewhere or whatever. But, you know, really, if you watch the one about Douglas Cole, that's called The Family. I think it's on Netflix. I encourage you, you know, take some time to watch that documentary. It's eye-opening, it's enlightening. And then watch the one about Clarence Avant, you know, to see, you know, the influence that both of these men had in their own way, because they understood their flow zone of control, of concern, what they were concerned about. They understood what they could control, which was ultimately what they could do. They didn't go tearing up stuff, lighting things on fire. It's like, you know what, this is what I can do. And then they took that and moved into the flow zone of influence. So when we talk about flowing from concern to influence, you have to ask yourself, what concerns you? What can you control? How can you influence? And then going back to, how will the atmosphere reflect the original? Because that's the working definition that we're going for influence, is changing the atmosphere to reflect the original. And so once again, we're talking about flowing from concern to influence. This is what we are going to talk about. If you need to take a picture of this or whatever, but we're going to talk about, you know, what are some of the concerns that we have, and then figure out, how do we control it? And then how can we influence things? And when we do influence it, how are we going to take it back to the original? Okay, so you guys got that? We're good. I can move on. Give me some thumbs up. We're good. I'm gonna stop the share here. So with that, once again, as kings, we need was it the earth has its ozones, we have our flow zones, and we have to make sure we understand our power in each zone. Our, what are those, in that zone of concerns, what concerns us? In that zone of control, what can I do about it? In that zone of influence, once I understand what I can do about it, how am I going to change it? How am I going to make a difference? And how am I going to make a difference to the point that it looks like its original design? And so I'm going to give a quick example, and then I'm going to let you guys go with it. So how many of us have adult children? Last week we talked about, whether we control our children, and, as parents, we do have a thing, to set boundaries. I think we were talking about Corey with a teenager. How many of us, if you have adult children, put a thumbs up, raise your hand, put a heart if you have adult children. And so how many of us with adult children, we have, they concern us. We have cares and concerns about our adult children. However, and I'm going to use myself as an example, we have, adult children, and we have 3, and all of them concern us in different ways. However, Wayne and I have to understand, and this is a growth. I'm not saying I got it all figured out, or that I actually, I'm doing good with it. Oh, wow, that's cool. I can raise my hand and it recognized me raising my hand and put my hand up. Did you guys know that? Okay, I got distracted. I'm sorry. So, yeah, TC's like, what? I think you have to update your it's a setting that you can use, Julie.
Now you didn't
Julie,
got everybody distracted now.
It's a setting that you have to go in to use. I remember doing that. It was the first time I saw it happen. But see, now we're distracted. No, so seriously, this is concerning Julie. I want to put my hand up. But so with our adult children, they have, we're concerned about them in different ways. But I am learning, and once learning, it's a process. I don't get it right all the time. What I can control about my adult children. I would love to have them do exactly what I would want them to do, what I think I taught them to do, and just be happy. But I can't control that. I understand it's out of my control. So the only thing I can control is myself and my response. And so there are some times when, I want to just go fly off the handle and say and do things that would not make the situation better. It would probably only make it worse. And, once again, been there, done that. And paid the consequences where you try to get into that manipulation. But once I understand that, what, this is what I can do about the situation. I can't control what you do as my adult child, but I can control my response to it, and then begin to offer my influence, begin to offer my advice to try to shift, to get them to shift their situations back to the original design, without, going into a bunch of detail, but, offer my advice. And so, instead of just, blabbing off, oh, well, you should do this, you should do that. I'm like, hey, can I give you a piece of advice? And I have to wait. I'm learning in the process. This is continual to just, what, can I offer you a piece of advice? Or sometimes you might say, well, I know you didn't ask for it, but let me just share this with you. And then you go into giving them what you was going to give them, but you have to leave it there. You can't control what they do with it. You can just model, well, you know what? I'm giving you this advice, either because this is something that I have done and it worked, or this is something that I should have done, and because I didn't do it, this happened and it didn't work, and I don't want you to follow those footsteps. But in the end, guess what? You are not in control of what they do with it. And I would say for parents of adult children, that's probably our biggest thing that we need to work on, is understanding our flow zone of control and realizing when it comes to our adult children, you have None. The only thing you can control is yourself and how much you are willing to help them out. Hey, mama, I need, $100. I can't control what you need, but I sure can control how much I'm going to give you. That's the only thing that we can control. And you will have so much more peace. You will have so much more peace with yourself and even with your adult child. For those of us with adult children, for those of you don't have adult children, just wait for it. It's coming. Trust me. So with that, let me put my own hand down here. What's happening here? Lower my hand. Ambassador Wayne, what I want to talk about is, or what I want to discuss is to have people just talk about an area of concern and maybe work that particular concern through those zones. Do you think it's better just to do it just by talking, or do you want to use a whiteboard? What's going to be easier for you to run this?
Let's try the whiteboard so everybody can see it, because if you miss something, hearing something, at least with the whiteboard, we can see it. So you want me to pop it up there?
Yeah, you share the whiteboard, and that way you can
open. And all right, everybody can see the whiteboard.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yes.
Okay, player. All right.
Yeah. So, maybe, you can just have one, put down concerns, and then, we can like name off some concerns, and then maybe we'll pick one and run it through those zones to see how that will look.
Concern.
Unless you had a different idea.
Now your influence is good enough. That idea is good.
Ambassador Laura,
Mm-hmm.
I want to put a plug in for our book. It starts with me. And on page 12, it has the 5 concerns. It's asking people, what are the top 5 concerns I have in my life right now? So if they don't want to talk openly now, that they can use that book and jot that down from watching our examples here.
Okay. And it doesn't necessarily have to be your own concern. It can be just a general concern that people have, like, okay, education, that's a big concern, nationally, what's going on in the education field. So Wayne, you can put that down there. So it doesn't even have to be a personal concern. You can just think of a general, local, regional, global concerns, what's happening in Pakistan, what's the big concern in Pakistan,
Or another concern I would say is economics.
Okay.
The way that the economy is going, especially here in the US with all prices and stuff rising like crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Housing. Oh my gosh, housing is a big concern. And once again,
Food, definitely. I went to the store this morning and I only got 3 items and it was $25.
Okay, so food prices, yeah. I've been looking at the cashier sideways when she fingered totaled me up. I was like, okay, what, you cheating me?
Yeah.
Oh, you actually got a cashier?
Oh.
I must say from Pakistan that there are many concerns we have, but our major concerns, as it is mentioned on the top, education, and the second major concern is to stop forced conversions in Pakistan, forced conversions of minorities. No?
Oh wow. Okay.
Well, I have a couple of them. One we have mentioned already, but one is retirement, and then the other one is politics.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm trying to get this box in my way. Retirement. And you said politics?
Yes. And for some reason, Chief, I can't see it. Is it it ain't showing up yet or what?
Okay, nobody can see that?
And see what politics.
I can
Yes,
see
I can.
everything.
I can see it.
Reggie,
You
is
see
your
everything.
screen? It might be your screen.
Another thing I would like to mention about our concern, there are from each 100 jobs, if we count on 100 jobs in any department, we have only one job for Christian in that 100 job.
I don't see it.
Yes, and it's really horrible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I still don't see it, y'all. I don't know what's going
You
on.
don't see the screen, Ambassador Reggie?
I see the whiteboard, but it's blank.
I'm not. Can everybody else see what Dwayne is writing?
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I can see
Yes,
what
we
he's
can,
writing.
Yeah,
I can see.
Yes.
you might need to
Maybe you
refresh
need
your
to
screen.
refresh your screen, Reggie.
Give me a minute.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go with these unless somebody has anything else. We're gonna go with these. And so looking. Say that again, Ambassador Carlos.
I got one.
Okay.
A real big concern of mine is, it really is a big concern, is how the people that say they are believers of Christ is falling for this false stuff. That's a big concern to me, how we are. I'm not talking about the unbelievers. I'm talking about the ones that say they know God are falling for these lies and deception. That's a concern to me.
When you say lies and deceptions, can you be a little bit more specific?
Yeah, I'm talking about believing stuff that totally contradicts what the Bible is saying. I mean, we're believing like outright blatant lies that's either being told by CNN, Fox, by the media, social media. It's like we're believing anything that totally goes against, well, that's not what God's word says, and we're believing it.
Okay.
Can you give me like a specific example? Because remember now, we got folks from all over. So they may not get CNN and Fox and all them folks.
So like one specific example.
The only thing I can think of is the scripture said they rather believe a lie than the truth. Let me see.
Carlos, I can help you. I just saw something stupid about some people at church, and the pastor told them to eat grass from the lands of something, and they would prosper. And these nutcases is in there eating grass.
Yeah, I saw that.
Itchy ears, itchy ears.
Yes, thank you for.
Well, yeah, they itching because they're allergic to the grass. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Them ticks
I'm
done got
sorry.
them fleas done got ears.
And there is also with that point from Pakistan, majority of the Pakistani pastors and the preachers think that the church has nothing to do with the politics and nothing to do with the education. Church is only the place of prayer and worship, nothing else.
Okay. So now, like I say, I'm quite sure if we had more time, we could list hundreds of concerns. Because here's the thing, if something doesn't concern you, then more likely you are going to have no interest in influencing it. So some of these things may concern you, some things may not. Okay. So once again, once we move from concern, so let's just pick one. Wayne, I'm gonna give you the honor. Pick one.
Food.
Okay. So when it deals with food pricing, maybe even food availability, what we have here was some kind of food deserts. But so let's take food. So if food pricing, food availability, hungry, children going hungry. I don't know about in Pakistan. But believe it or not, Pastor Wasim, in America, we have children who go hungry. That's a concern. That in this land of abundance, the so-called greatest, one of the richest nations in the world, we have children who go hungry for whatever reasons.
But they have
So,
on $200 shoes.
excuse me?
I said, but they have on $200 shoes.
Right, right, right.
And
Amen.
that,
Wait.
uh,
What
and
can
that's
we control?
yeah, and that's true in some cases, but in some cases, these people, that's true in some cases. Tammy, you got your hand up.
Yes, and some of them, some families, the mama got her hair all done and whipped up and her nails and feet done, and the children looking a mess and they hungry.
Yeah. So let's just deal with, so we're talking about the area of concern. So now let's talk about what we can control about that. What is in our control when we talk about food pricing, food availability, even children going hungry? What can we control?
Well, one of the things that we can control, first of all, something my wife did for the first time, she started growing her own vegetables. And then
Okay.
we can find other organizations that we can support that's feeding the homeless and children. And then we can find a family or families ourselves and go and buy them groceries or whatever. So it's different things that we can do individual as corporate also.
That's good, Reggie. So Wayne, if you could put like I don't know if you can do another column over there that says control, what's in our control, and then put that answer
Okay,
down.
you can't see that?
Now it came up, it's up now, Chief, so I'm good.
Now I'm talking about Laura.
No. Can you guys see it? I don't see it on my.
I see concerns, but not control.
Oh, okay. Now that's interesting.
Yeah, that's all I see is concerns. And then the list.
I got a whole thing over here that I'm doing. That's why I was looking. I'm like, I'm doing it.
Hey guys, did anybody get a message from Dr. Banks?
Let me see.
Can you see that?
As per controlling something.
Yeah, I see food and what you can control.
Yes, I would like to describe about that. Like all other people have the three main menus of eating. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And after getting 80 plus children in my free education school, Zion Free Education School, I have quit our lunch to give them proper education, to serve that money of our lunch time on their education. And after that, we provide at least one-time meal, lunch meal in a week, as per our budget.
Okay.
That's what we are controlling.
That's good. That's good. So like that, I can't see anything on either of my screens, Wayne. So I don't know. So y'all gonna try to take your own notes if for
How
those who
about
can't.
that?
Nope, I see the concern column. That's all I'm seeing.
Okay.
I don't know.
I see the food that says what we can.
Now you can see it, Reggie. Nobody else can see.
That's crazy.
What you done did? What you done did over there?
It just popped up.
Oh no, I don't know. That's really weird, and I'm afraid to refresh my screen because I might get cut off. So y'all just kind of. So y'all just kind of.
I got it. I just keep doing it.
Okay, so right now we're talking about food, food availability, hungry kids, food pricing. This is a concern. We talked about things that we can do, things that are in your control. We talked about the garden. We talked about providing meals. The Daniels, I see Matthew.
Grocery store, maybe do some.
Oh, you're real low.
You're real low.
You're really low.
Gotcha. How about now? Can you hear me better?
There you go.
Yes.
All right. One of the things you do next time you go shopping, grocery shopping, maybe do some prepackaged food that you can leave in the car or your vehicle as you're driving around. If you see somebody that has a sign or a need, you can just hand it over to them.
Okay. That's preparation. I like that. That's something that you can control. I think Corey put in the chat using coupons and things like that. I want to say one of our partners, Vanessa, she used to do couponing classes. I don't know if she's still doing that, but that was her personal contribution to lowering food costs. She had couponing classes. I think that was Lady Vanessa who did that.
Yep.
Ambassador Carlos.
I think TC now was before me.
Oh, okay.
One of the things that I would say when it comes to food cost is because we have all the grocery store chains and we frequent those, they continue to raise prices. If we started doing more local stuff, supporting local people and bringing the cost back, bringing the money back to our local places, we could also get some of these big food chains to lower their prices, because if we're not buying, they don't have a store to have. So, plus some of the stuff that you can get locally is probably healthier for you.
Yeah.
So because it's not full of all the chemicals and, the week old chickens that are now, they went from birth to full grown in 7 days.
Yeah.
You don't have those if you go locally. So I think in that way we can help reduce some of the cost of what food is costing us in the stores.
Okay. Awesome. Ambassador Carlos.
Yeah, I think 3 things. One is that we stop being so wasteful, because even with the food prices still being the same, we're still throwing away food.
Mm.
Then
Okay.
number 2, that we, again, what you said, practice self-control, discipline. We don't have to eat as much as we used to eating. We can just cut back. We ain't gonna starve. And
Ooh. Ouch, 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 ouch.
and then number 3 is learn to be content with what we have, what we do have, because like we said, there's people we complain about stuff that we don't have, but like my grandma used to say, you crying talking about you hungry with a loaf of bread under your arm. Just because I don't have no meat to put on that bread, at least I got some bread to eat. So we were so ungrateful. Just be grateful and thankful, that we do have something to eat, even though food prices are still high, we still manage to throw away food.
Okay.
True.
Ambassador Corey.
Well, Carlos, I have to say you are 100% right, because I got to go clean out my refrigerator right now. And ain't no telling what's in there. And then also what TC was saying about the produce. Now I do get my tomatoes and cucumbers for free because my friend David's garden, he just has entirely too much. But I would like to say, Reggie, I'll buy my produce from you. What you got?
I saw that in the chat, but I was talking about something that we can do on an individual basis.
I'm individual. I know where you live. I'll drive up to your house.
He's talking about for his own home, Corey.
I'm saying we all can do it for each
That's
of our
right.
home. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
In other
Reggie,
words,
you had something else you wanted to say, Reggie?
Yeah, another thing I was going to add is share information, because one of the things we're doing on my job is we finding different things that give cash back, and we are sharing that. One of the things I've been doing is called Upside, and so far I done got $32 back off of gas.
Okay, cool. And Lower your hand. And I don't know, Matthew, for those of you who don't know, Matthew Daniels, he builds these systems called aquaponics when we talk about, providing, your own food. And I don't, Matthew, are you near one of your aquaponics that you can show us a quick picture of it? But these are like self-contained, you can put fish in the water, and the fish waste is what fertilizes the food on top. It's a very intricate system, but basically, you can have your fish, and then you can have all your vegetables and your fruits on top. And once again, it's like a self-contained fish market, fruit and vegetable market, right in your own backyard. I don't, can you show us a picture of one, Matthew? I don't know if we can see that. Are you near yours? I don't know. Anyway, but Tasha actually has one in her yard, and if you maintain it, you could, once again, you can eat off the land. There you go. Can you guys see that? And so I think in that middle part, that was, who can't see, Matthew, kind of put it down so we can see it a little bit.
Oh no, that's it.
Oh, and so is that the middle part has your fish in it or something, doesn't it?
Yes. So down in here, there's the fish down in there. I got catfish in this tank right here. And then over in the next tank, I got some tilapia. I know it's kind of hard to see. I'll try to pull this up.
I see them.
Tilapia down there. And then my back tanks, I got a couple of extra tanks with goldfish. And then also some crawfish, believe it or not, just kind of cleaning everything up. So it's goldfish down there. And then got some crawfish in here. Just kind of cleaning the tank up itself. But yeah, so I'm trying now as well to experiment with plants like fig trees, olive trees, and a pear tree. So I'm working that out and trying to see the amount of water and everything that it needs. They're kind of coming along, but I'm working on that, trying to make the adjustments. But the vegetables and the fruit and your herbs, that's all that all comes along, growing very well.
Hold on, let me see. Is everybody seeing? Let me close this whiteboard. How about that?
There we go.
Can everybody see that now?
Let them bring it back up.
Okay.
I was seeing.
Can you pin him, Wayne?
Yeah, can you spotlight?
There we go. Yeah.
There we go.
Hey, y'all just now seen it?
Yeah. So go back. You have to go back over. My fault.
All good. So here's the plants up top. Here's the entire system. Kind of overview over here. The plants are up top there, and then I was mentioning about the trees are over there. I'm still working on trying to adjust and see how much water and everything that they need. And then down below here is the fish. Got catfish on this side, so once they get to full size, can go ahead and enjoy those. And tilapia, and another tank right down here. And then also some goldfish, as I was mentioning earlier.
Now they don't eat the goldfish. The goldfish is just for fertilization.
Exactly. Thanks for the clarification. And then the crawfish are down here. Just kind of cleaning everything up, cleaning up that tank where everything pours into. But yeah, tomatoes, eggplants, even some lemon trees, greens, plenty of greens, love this. All your leafy vegetables, they grow in here as well. You got mint, just in abundance. And then also different curly kale and some collards. Collards, y'all love collards. They grow extremely well over here. And then all different types of herbs. Y'all can see that as well.
Daniel, Matthew, can you go over to that little part that was white, that it would look like additional things you were growing on the side? What is that?
So these are some cabbage. They've been here for a while, but I was still trying to grow them. But these are cabbage. They're from last season. I just got them in here still, but those grow well, especially during the winter. That's more of a winter plant. And then basil for the herbs. I've got that over here, and then also a large basil plant over in the main tank system or the flood and drain system as well. And then okra as well, if y'all can see that. I got okra growing out here also.
So, as you guys can see, this is a whole, when we talk about, food availability and things like that, you have a whole little self-contained system. And when you think about, well, it's using a lot of water. Once you fill it up once and you maintain it, it just recycles the water. So you're not constantly running water into it. The water just recycles itself. And he builds these things. He travels around if it need be, and he builds these things. And, Pastor Wasim, I don't know, when I think about, let me remove the spotlight here. Think about how useful this might be, even in Pakistan. And I don't know if you have these things, in Pakistan, but when you don't really need fertile ground, you can be in the desert as long as you have access to get some initial water up in there. So once again, Ambassador Carlos, you got your hand up. You want to say something? You on mute?
You can go ahead and finish what you're saying. Yeah.
When we talk about food and the prices and the availability, and we listed a ton of things that are in our control, what we can do. So we've gone from complaining about the food shortages, complaining about hungry children, complaining about prices too. Okay, you know what? This is a concern. It attracts us, it impacts us. It might be a distraction for some, but you know what can we individually do about it? One thing I was going to say is, we could all, for those who would like to, we have these cards to go to like Sam's Club and Costco, Pastor Wasim. Those are like big warehouses here where you can buy food in bulk. And normally, like say, with Wayne and I, it's only two of us, so I don't buy a lot of bulk foods because it would go to waste. But you know what? I'm thinking that maybe I need to buy some bulk foods, and then once again, we can hold some to the side for those times when someone is in need. During the pandemic. Here, Pastor Wasim, toilet paper, people went wild with buying toilet paper. You couldn't find toilet paper on the shelf. I mean, they were limited us to, one 4-pack. But before the pandemic, I usually always keep a big stash of toilet paper anyway. So luckily I had my stash, but I was able to bless some people with toilet paper because they couldn't find any on the shelves. And so, there's only 2 butts in the house, but I always had stacks and stacks of toilet paper. But once again, that allowed people to say, hey, I need toilet paper on Facebook. Like, hey, come by the house, come get you a roll or 2. I'll help you out. And so once again, that's what we could do individually, is to be prepared for those moments when there might be some food shortages. Have some kind of thing where, okay, I don't need 15 cans of beans, but I'm going to set a few aside because somebody might need some beans. So once again, this is what I can do, that's in my control. Ambassador Carlos.
Yes. And I was going back to what their original TC had originally said at the beginning, as well as prioritize what's a necessity for us. We don't need to buy another article of clothing of no kind just because it's on sale, or what. We got enough clothes to last us till Jesus come probably, and it won't wear, I got this shirt because it was just $1, or it's normally $5. Okay, can you eat that shirt?
We're gonna put you on mute, Ambassador Carlos.
Okay.
Keep it up.
All right.
Keep it up.
I'll put myself on mute. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Carlos, you are stepping on toes around
Because
here.
you sure speaking to me, I'm going to tell you right now.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. And so now when we talk about our flow zone of control, how does that look when we are influencing what's happening with the food shortages? As you can see, we said, getting things back to the original design, that everybody is, people have what they need. That's how we influence. We go from that concern to, this is what we control. And when we do what we can do, then we can influence food availability. We can influence how, we can't control the prices of food, but we can control how it impacts our own finances, how it impacts, finances of other people. And so, with that, we could probably go on and on with this. It's, getting, it's getting late here. And so we're going to try to wrap it up. Lady Donna, you got something else you want to add?
Yes, I like to say, you mentioned about Lady Vanessa with the couponing. She was the one that worked along with me to teach me how to grow my tomatoes and things in pots, because we do not have a big yard. We stay in a duplex, and I used to didn't think that it was possible to even grow anything. I never had an interest in doing that because I felt like I had to have a big yard or whatever. But I found out watching YouTube, going to Home Depot, asking questions and things. And so Lady Sharon, I asked her, she's a good resource person, and she directed me to Lady Vanessa, and she helped me get started. And so, the best thing to do is teach people how to fish instead of giving them. Well, I mean, in some cases, it's best to teach people so that they can be self-sufficient. And so that's one thing that the Most High taught us, is that you teach as well as bless people with food. I know a lot of people can't grow food, but I wanted to learn because I see the signs and symptoms of things going to get where we're going to have to possibly go back to the old days. And even in the healthcare field, people, the hospitals and things, expensive healthcare. We might have to go back to the old remedies that the old people taught us, castor oil, the natural things. And so it's good to learn from each other, and it would be nice if we teach each other these skills to help us to help one another and help others in the community. And so that's how, we can show love towards one another, and be an influence, and also bring about the gospel, and help people get saved, and help it. Yeah. So I go on and on. Yeah, that's my take.
And once again, this was just dealing with the concern zone of food. You can take any of your cares, any of the things that you are concerned about. I encourage you to work through your King's flow zones. What am I concerned about? What's attracting me? What's impacting me? What's distracting me? And then, what can I control? Get into that flow zone of what can I control, and how do I need to exercise self-control? And then when you do that, you can move into that zone of how am I going to use what I can do, what I can control to influence the situation. And we just talked about that with food, doing what we can do. It could be something as small as couponing, or it could be something as large as building an aquaponic tank, or getting one built. And not going back to the original design. I mean, you can't get more original in design than getting things from the earth. Even with health, you can grow grow different things that are used to make medicinal things. And so the ultimate goal is to, when we talk about influencing, making those changes, sometimes it might be a little small changes, like we talked about with food, the couponing, but going back to how do we get it back to the original, where we are living as God would have us to live. So you have your flow zone of your flow zone of concern, your flow zone of control, and then your flow zone of influence. And we just need, as kings, to manage our flow zones. So with that, Father, we thank you. We thank you for this wisdom that you have given us. We thank you that you have given us a heart of compassion, to be aware of things that we need to be concerned about. And Father, we ask you to just always, Holy Spirit, remind us what we need to be, how we need to exercise self-control, and remind us the things that we have control of, and give us the wisdom and the knowledge to implement those things so that we can have an influence and make those changes in the fields, in our lives, in the lives of other people. Father, let us not just complain about things and say, oh, we're concerned about these things, but moving into what can I do as a king? What can I do as a king in my zone of control? And once we understand those things, Father, give us the wisdom and the knowledge to implement those changes, to make life better, not only for ourselves, but for those who you have put into our sphere of influence. Father, we thank you. I bless each and every person here as you go about your day and your week. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We thank you guys. We thank you guys. Let me stop.
Excellent job, Laura.